Okay, I am Paul Nichols, the father of Kara Nichols, my 19-year-old daughter, murdered by the defendant. It is my belief that the trial concluding today with sentencing was a miscarriage of justice, as seen in the weak verdict of manslaughter. I believe that Joel Hollendorfer is guilty of murder in the first degree. It is public knowledge that the defendant has been a user of crack cocaine and meth. Both narcotics are associated with users becoming agitated and often violent. He is clearly a danger to women and society in general. This fact is proved by what he did to my daughter, Kara. I do not believe a word of the Christina Palmer testimony. Nor do I believe the theory trotted out by defense that while a tragedy, our daughter's death was just an accidental death, likely affected by drug use. I do not believe that our daughter was accidentally strangled to death in some sort of deviant sex game. There is no such thing as accidental strangulation. To even consider such a concept is an affront to common sense. If, as the defense counsel claims, this was a tragic accident, then why didn't he try to resuscitate our daughter? Since the crime happened in his car, why didn't he urgently drive Kara to the nearest hospital and try to save her life? No, that is not the way it happened. I believe that the defendant, who plainly admits to gaining sexual pleasure in violent acts against women, met up with my daughter with intent to rape her and strangle her to death. He planned to kill my daughter and then bury her in his parents' backyard. And that is exactly what he did. He is a killer and a grave and serious threat to society. I do not believe that the murderer, in a moment of guilt, confessed his accidental crime to his ex-wife. I think his ex-wife and parents are all co-conspirators in this crime. I believe that the defendant and Ms. Palmer concocted this alibi story to abet the murderer's defense and hopeful acquittal. We brought forth evidence to law enforcement the likely event that the defendant either knew my daughter Kara directly or knew of her. We brought forth evidence that the murderer was friendly with known exploiters of women, pimps, and that he likely violently abused women. We brought forth tips that there are potentially as many as 10 murdered girls buried on the Hollendorfer property. In court testimony, there is evidence of at least 2 male DNA signatures attached to the duct tape in our daughter's grave. It is obvious that the murderer had help disposing of our precious daughter's body. Unfortunately, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office did little or nothing to follow up our tips and other evidentiary leads. I believe that the defendant is a cold-blooded killer who deliberately planned and executed our daughter. I think he preys on vulnerable girls with drug problems. On the night in question, he texted our daughter telling her that he had some heroin and would let her have it cheaply, in fact, even bring it to her. He claims that he contacted our daughter like a professional prostitute willing to do another job. At the trial, much was said about Kara being an escort, a professional prostitute, but the evidence to this point is weak at best. For God's sake, she was just 19 years old. Professional prostitute indeed. Both the district attorney's office and the El Paso County Sheriff's Office know that my daughter did not place or pay for the solicitation ad on the Backpage site. There is also no evidence showing our daughter solicited the murderer for sex. There is only the murderer's trumped up story. But there is plenty of evidence that our daughter needed more heroin that night. The murderer took full advantage of that. Our Kara was very particular about her appearance, her hair, makeup, clothing, etc. Before going out, she would spend much time in front of the mirror perfecting her hair and makeup. Neither our daughter nor a so-called escort would ever walk over to the loaf and jug just wearing old house slippers. No, she was suffering and needed to buy some heroin, as testimony provided. His execution of Kara's murder was expertly accomplished, as if he knew what he was doing, and perhaps had indeed done this before. Just look at his expert burial methods: 6 layers of trash bags, multiple wrappings of duct tape, a lime covering to aid in decomposition. It looks like it's his common practice. His method is obviously tried and true. He has it down to a science. And of course, he almost got away with it. This modus operandi of preying on vulnerable young women, strangling them to death, and then expertly burying their bodies is often seen in other serial murderer cases. Joel Hollendorfer matches up well with other sexual predators and killers. Let the record show that this story does not begin with a murder, a death, and a loss. Instead, it begins with me filing a missing persons case. Our daughter, Kara, aged 19 years old, became a missing person on October 9th, 2012. We feared the worst, but held out hope for Kara's safe return. But the not knowing part of this was just awful. We went through the stages of grief and became a shattered family. We went from being a happy family with many friends and glad tidings to incredibly sad people looked upon as social pariahs. I became very depressed, and my health and my career suffered. Working as a salesman is difficult if you are taciturn, negative, and plainly unhappy. I lost my job, and with it, lost over $150,000 in unpaid commission. My career has suffered. I remain underemployed and underpaid. We suffered 10 years of not knowing grief, all the while the murderer, Joel Hollendorfer, his mother, father, and his ex-wife all knew about the crime, but did nothing to ease our pain. This is an outrage. The defendant was charged with 2 counts, but realistically, the indictment should have included a third charge, larceny. The defendant stole our daughter Kara's life, and of course her future. She was just 19 years old and should have had 50 to 60 years left to live. The defendant stole our happy family. Due to emotional pain, we remain unable to look at the old family photo albums and reminisce about our young family. The defendant stole our happy family future. Kara should have lived into adulthood and been with us into our old age. Kara would have been a joy to us and helped care for us in our late years. I was 53 years old when the defendant murdered my daughter. Realistically, I should have had 20 to 30 years more time to enjoy my precious daughter. The loss of these years with Kara is incalculable. As a family, we no longer celebrate holidays like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, or even birthdays. Instead, holidays are just more opportunities for emotional pain and suffering. The defendant stole my identity of being a happy father, a successful businessman, a man with a thriving career. Suffering the 10 plus years of our daughter being a missing person and the horror of learning the defendant murdered Kara and buried her in garbage bags atop animals on his mother's property caused me to fall into a deep depression. The heinousness of my beloved daughter being murdered in a sex crime has consumed me. Before this crime, I was a happy, healthy man with many friends and a soaring career. My mental health has deteriorated, and so too has my physical well being. I developed autoimmune disorders and chronic pain. This has also contributed to my career challenges and my ability to earn adequate money to support my family. The defendant must confess his sin of murdering my daughter, hiding her body on his mother's property, lying about these facts for over 10 years, and showing no remorse for his actions. The murder and degradation of our precious daughter is both unspeakable and outrageous. He must apologize and ask for forgiveness and the forgiveness of society at large. We would also expect financial restitution from him and his family. The trial was a terrible miscarriage of justice. The murderer presents as a classic serial killer with no remorse. He is a threat to society at large and young, vulnerable women in particular. Let the court know that should the defendant ever come up for parole, we would oppose it and attend any parole hearings so that we may reread our victim impact statements. This we would do for the rest of our lives. And after we are deceased, our surviving children would continue to oppose his parole likewise for the remainder of their lives. He needs to be locked up forever. My family and I will do whatever we can to see that he serves his entire 24-year sentence. Thank you.